Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming program author Truett Memphis, and he is the author of Littlethumb Sneezed. Before I bring in today's guest, a quick reminder that selected interviews are available on our iPhone app, which can be downloaded in the App Store, as well as on TV in the Roku channel and Amazon Fire TV. Our app name on all platforms is simply The Author Show. Truett, how are you?
I'm doing great, Don. Thank you.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
So I'm currently an independently published author. I've got 3 titles available. Littlethumb Sneezed was the first one I published in print-on-demand form back in 2016. And I'm gearing up for a sequel to it.
So tell us about your book.
Littlethumb is the tale of a young boy sneezes one day and the world freezes. I'm not giving anything away. That's right there at the beginning. And then the story is about what happens to him after everything gets back to normal. He becomes a child prodigy painter. And then from there on out, it's just basically the hilarious and sometimes tragic story of his life.
Now, who did you write your book for specifically? Who's your target audience?
So people that enjoy reading Vonnegut, Tom Robbins, and TV, the people that watch Rick and Morty, The Family Guy, just thoughtful comedy. People who enjoy satire, social commentary, I should say. So anyone who enjoys, slapstick comedy and literary fiction, tales that mean something besides just the story that they're actually telling.
So could you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you would say runs throughout your book?
Absolutely. Generally speaking, almost all of my stories have a focus on empathy and compassion and being kind. At the same time, I like for those compassionate and kind characters to have extremely strong backbones. So, to show strength and kindness.
So if you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
Oh, with Littlethumb Sneezed, definitely creative outlets. A lot of the way that he deals with the trauma in his life is through his artwork. And, I believe in that personally as someone. We've all suffered tragedy and heartbreak in our lives. I feel like allowing yourself to create, not being afraid to put things out there, it's so healthy for you emotionally. It'll help you get through just about any pain or suffering that you might have in this life, at least in my opinion. Some might disagree, but I feel like it's one of the best things you can do for yourself to survive this crazy world.
Now, if you could compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
I'm going to say Lamb by Christopher Moore, because Lamb is about a young Jesus and Littlethumb is, in effect, a bit of a messianic character. The plots are wildly different, but the comedic tone is often similar. That's a question that I've struggled with when people ask me about the book, because I do believe it is a fairly unique story. But again, if you're comparing tones and my narrative voice, my favorite authors are Kurt Vonnegut and Tom Robbins, so I try to kind of dance a little dance where I'm similar to them without trying to be them, because I know, you're talking about great authors, so I'm not trying to compare myself to them skill-wise, but I endeavor to kind of try to balance between their tones and the way they present stories.
So tell us about some of the characters in the book.
Littlethumb Brooks is the protagonist and main character. He has an arch nemesis, kind of unbeknownst to him, named Tommy Toxic. Tommy is a childhood rock star, punk rocker, and he's a tragic character. He was the child of heroin addicts that was basically sold off to a music publicist and turned into a little demon, to be frank. He's the villain of the story. Sawyer Pettimore is Littlethumb's art teacher and nemesis and discovers his prodigious talent. And then Daring Bird Jones is Littlethumb's uncle, who basically is his mentor and raises him and plays a significant role in shaping his identity as he grows into an adult. And then Dirty Dick Man is the publicist, that's his kind of stage name, if you will, but he's the publicist that helps make Littlethumb famous when he's a child.
So, what's the number one takeaway that you want readers to get from reading this book?
Number one, that they enjoyed it and had a good time reading it. Again, the themes that are involved, it's an incredible tale of forgiveness at the end. It's an extraordinary act on Littlethumb's part that might not seem real to folks in the everyday world, but I've seen it and I've witnessed it and I've read about, things like this, people being able to forgive wildly atrocious acts. And so at the end of the day, that's what the story ends on. And I would say that's the lasting message that I hope people walk away with.
So, how many titles do you have available?
3 currently, and they're all slightly different in comedic tone. One's a slapstick and the other one's a little darker, and then there's Littlethumb, which kind of balances in between.
So, where do you get your ideas for your stories?
Most of the time, it's a single word or two, or even just the name of a character that pops into my head. Littlethumb, I was working on another book when the words Littlethumb Sneezed popped into my head one day, so I wrote it down and was like, well, I'm going to have to come back to that. But I didn't want to get distracted from the story I was currently telling, so I put it in a notebook, and then when it came time, I started to ponder it and put the pieces together, okay, Littlethumb sneezed. What happened after that? And so that's usually how it happens for me, is a character specific, hardcore specific idea of a character pops into my head and I start building around that. But then I try to shape it out into a strong plot as well, so that it's a good balance between character studies and a fun, attractive plot to get into.
So, did your environment or upbringing play any major role in your writing?
Absolutely. I come from a family with a lot of strong personalities. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, plenty of your listeners who get that. There was a lot of yelling and shouting and loving and encouragement. At the same time, I have one sibling and she was 5 years older than me, so I played alone a lot as a child. And so a lot of that alone time basically just gave birth to like forced creativity, or you're really, really bored. So, I was constantly coming up with stories for my G.I. Joes, or just running around in the yard, being a ninja and having allies and enemies. It definitely came naturally for me.
So, what can you tell us about this genre and why you decided to write in this genre?
I write literary commercial fiction. I try to tell stories that are commercially attractive, but with literary quality. And generally speaking, is because it's what I like to read. I like to read unusual tales that hold some sort of, intellectual value. Again, my favorite authors are Kurt Vonnegut and Tom Robbins. Yet at the same time, I read a lot of Stephen King growing up when I was younger, and I loved the Dark Tower series. So my blended genre writing is really just a reflection of the fact that I am not a hardcore genre reader myself. I like to read a lot of different styles of writing, So again, Christopher Moore, I'm a fan of his. I've really enjoyed Charles Bukowski's, a little darker, and I've read a lot of classics. I try to offer something that has value, but is also a fun ride.
So, what's been your most rewarding experience since publishing this book?
Reader feedback. Part of the reason why I chose to publish my titles as Truant Memphis is because I wasn't sure if I put something forth that was as good as I wanted it to be. And every time a reader reaches out to me that I've never met, strangers, and tells me that they've bought my book and that they enjoyed it, it makes it all worthwhile. Because, obviously it takes a lot of time, a lot of alone time to put these things together and put them out there. So feedback from strangers, and even some of the negative stuff, because I know that they were at least compelled to say something to me. And I think that, your end goal as an artist is to be compelling one way or the other. If not considered great, you've at least made people stop and think. So when people take the time to respond and reach out to me, that makes me know that my effort is worthwhile.
So how would you describe your writing style?
I have been described by my friend and content editor as aside versational. The word aside versational. I have a strong performance background, so I tend to write like I'm envisioning myself on stage performing the story, not reading it, but literally like telling the story the way a stand-up comedian would. So there's breaks, there's fourth wall breaks, there's asides where I'm just talking directly to the audience and kind of pouring myself out there in the midst of the story. So, I've had people tell me that at first it's a little jarring, but then they get used to it. And because I keep the story moving pretty quickly, most of the feedback has been very positive for the way that I present the story and talk to the audience as myself at the same time.
So, are your characters pure fiction, or do you draw from people you know in real life?
Mostly pure fiction, but obviously I think we're all drawing on all the experiences and wacky people and characters or completely droll people that we've met in our lives. The one time I really based a character on someone in my personal life, it was my grandmother. That was in a book that I have not actually published. It was my first finished manuscript. And I tend to dabble in archetypes. So I write characters that they start out as like hardcore archetypes and then they get more subtle along the way where I start to add nuance. I've bounced around quite a bit in my life and I've met a lot of people. And so all that starts to bleed into the characters. And then there's honestly a little bit of me in each and every one of them, even the darker, crazier ones.
So, would you say you're more of a character artist or more a plot-driven writer?
Again, I try to find that balance between the two, but it typically starts with characters. In fact, one of my published novels started out as a series of character sketches simply because I didn't have a long-form idea and I wanted to keep writing. So I started writing these characters and realized that I loved them and shaped them into a narrative. So I would say I start character-driven, but then again, sometimes that can be a slog, just getting hyper detailed about the nuance of personality. So I try to provide a plot that's intriguing and fun and will keep the reader hooked once they know who the characters are.
So, in your opinion, who should buy your book?
Youngsters, to be frank. To get started, I tend to gear my stories towards late teens, early adults that are still trying to figure the world out and themselves and their place in the world. There is a part of me that's trying to impart wisdom to my younger self when I write. So my stories start out geared towards the younger generations. Maybe I might pass something along to them that helps shape the way they think about the world, while at the same time trying to tell a good story, that older adults can enjoy as well. But a lot of my themes might be old hat to them as opposed to the younger generations who are this whole thing, still wide-eyed and seeing this thing in all its glory from a new perspective.
Do you have a website?
Yes, I do. It's truantmemphis.com. I have a blog there where I post fairly regularly, but not weekly or anything like that. I don't spam my followers, but I do produce prose mostly, and then some continuations of the universe I've created with my stories. In blog posts there. All of my titles are available through links there. And I actually have some artwork that I've created posted in the gallery as well.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been Truant Memphis, and he is the author of Littlethumb Sneezed. Truant, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you and your listeners.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Go out there, buy the book today, and please share this interview with your friends so that they too have the opportunity to discover our guests and their work. The Author Show can be accessed at any time at theauthorshow.com. Selected interviews can also be found on major platforms like Amazon Fire TV, the Roku channel, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, and many more. And whether you're an author who would like to be featured or a reader in search of new books to read, The Author Show is a great place to start. Check us daily as we continue to introduce wonderful authors of very interesting books on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.